Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening and to address this very, very serious subject matter of human trafficking. And I want to thank our club sisters and our chairpersons, Chair Lady Pamela Jr. She'll acknowledge the other chair co-chairs. We have I want to say to the Brooklyn Club, thank you very much. It's been real. We are doing very, very, very important programming, and we want to continue. And I want it couldn't be done if it wasn't for you and your support and getting out the information to the network. Um, Understand that we are going to have all the sessions recorded, and we are recording as we speak. And also, we will be sharing information and partnering with our Dr. Q. I'd like to ask our chaplain, Adrena Coleman, to please open us up in prayer.
I'm here. Can you hear me? Good evening. You hear me?
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we don't need
Okay,
to.
I want to take it off. I want to take it off mute for a minute because I'm walking and I don't want the noise to mess up the phone.
Yeah, put it on mute. Please.
All right.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone had a blessed evening. I hope it's not too much noise out here, but I'm going to try to just do a short prayer. Gracious Father, we thank you once again for another evening that you allowed us to be together on this platform. We thank you for the information that we're about to hear. We ask you to bless everyone that's on this line this evening. Bless those that couldn't make it. Let us be able to disperse of this information so that we can help our community. We can help our friends and our family. We just give you praise and we just give you honor for our president, each member, each officer, in the mighty precious name of Jesus, our guests and our panelists. We thank you. We bless you. We give your name all honor and glory. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So our chairperson, Dr. Pamela Jr.
Good evening. Go ahead, Madam President.
Yes, I'd like to welcome everyone, and in particular our speaker, Mr. DeJesus. And also I want to acknowledge our organization, the Brooklyn Club of National Association of Business and Professional Women's Clubs. We are part of the Northeast District, and our governor is Evelyn Streeter Frizzle, and our vice governor is Nicole McCatherine, and naturally our national president, Sherelle Carper, and our national first vice president, Dr. Connolly. And know that our organization is very, very concerned about this, the issue of human trafficking, and we want to do everything we can to advocate towards minimizing human trafficking and its effects on our community. So with that, I want to hand everything over to our chairperson, Pamela Jr., and let us get started.
Yes, good evening. Let me first introduce our committee members. So we have Dr. Kim Best, who's also Director of Lifetime Membership. We have Lori Ayers, who's also our Financial Secretary and Technology Guru for me. We have Adrena Coleman, our chaplain. We have Pamela Payne, who is our second vice president and youth director. We have Madam President Barbara Biggs Glover ad hoc, and we have our first vice president, Tanya Webster. Good evening. So, and I'd also like to introduce our panelists. Now, as of right now, we have with us Emmanuel DeJesus, who is with the Kings County District Attorney's Pride Connect. He will be our guest speaker, and we will be talking about human trafficking, and it may get a little interesting. So It's going to be okay, though. He's going to give us the information, and then he's going to show us and give us information as to how we can get help for those who are in need. Okay, so let me first talk about who is vulnerable and what is human trafficking. So human trafficking can happen to anyone, but some people are more vulnerable than others. Significant risk factors include recent migration or relocation, substance use, mental health concerns, involvement with the children welfare system, and being a runaway or homeless youth. Often, traffickers identify and leverage their victims' vulnerabilities in order to create dependency. Who are the traffickers? Perpetrators of human trafficking span all racial, ethnic, and gender demographics and are as diverse as survivors. Some use their privilege, wealth, and power as a means of control, while others experience the same socioeconomic oppression as their victims. They include individuals, business owners, members of a gang or a network, parents or family members, intimate partners, owners of farms or restaurants, and powerful corporate executives and government representatives. U.S. law defines human trafficking as the use of force, fraud, or coercion to compel a person into commercial sex acts or labor or services against his or her will. The one exception involves minors and commercial sex. Inducing a minor into commercial sex is considered human trafficking, regardless of the presence of force, fraud, or coercion. Human trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of people through force, fraud, or deception, with the aim of exploiting them for profit. Men, women, and children of all ages and from all backgrounds can become victims of this crime, which occurs in every region of the world. The traffickers often use violence or fraudulent employment agencies and fake promises of education and job opportunities to trick and coerce their victims. Human trafficking is the business of stealing freedom for profit. In some cases, traffickers trick, defraud, or physically force victims into providing commercial sex. In others, victims are lied to, assaulted, threatened, or manipulated into working under inhumane, illegal, or otherwise unacceptable conditions. It is a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry that denies freedom to over 24.9 people around the world. My first question, Antonio, to you is, from the perspective of the DA's office, what is human trafficking?
Wait, you said Antonio?
I'm sorry, Emmanuel.
Oh, I wasn't sure if Antonio was here.
Emmanuel,
It's okay.
I'm so sorry, Emmanuel.
So the perspective, so we do have a bureau that's specifically human trafficking. And again, just like you stated, which was very correct, there's various ways that someone can be exploited. There's various definitions that are put on. Most of the cases that come through the district attorney's office are cases that do have to do with more the prostitution type, more the sexual act type, in that a lot of times they're younger females that the average age, sadly, is between 11 and 13 is the average age of someone who is sexually trafficked. And that's something that's national. There's certain things that put certain cities or certain places and make it an easier place for various people to be trafficked or to be brought in. And that has to do with the entry points. So how many airports are in the New York City area? Does anybody know?
3. We have
Well, two,
JFK.
and
We have
then you got
JFK,
Jersey, one is
LaGuardia,
in
and Newark.
Jersey. Well, that's
So
in Jersey, but yeah, Newark in Jersey.
So Newark also counts.
Seven.
Go for it.
Seven.
Which are the 7?
Westchester, LaGuardia, MacArthur, JFK, Newark. There's one in Trenton also. I don't know how many I counted yet.
And so I would even go as
Oh,
far.
Hartford.
I would go as far even to say that, because it's a tri-state area, right? We think about the tri-state, but I would even go as far as say that even Philly's 2 hours away. And so there's also the fact that Amtrak comes through here, that all the buses, you have the Port Authority, you have Long Island Railroad, there's all these different ways to bring someone and take someone. And a lot of times I know that Pamela mentioned that Wall Street, that there's other, especially the high end, where if you have someone who's being trafficked, there's usually someone who's paying for that. There's usually what you would call like the customers. And whenever there's sporting events, that's a huge part. And so there's so many sporting events that happen that bring in so many out of towners to New York City. And they come and they go, that builds the almost like the clientele, if you will, of people willing to be able to pay. And then that keeps everything going. Is that making sense? The ability to have a certain amount of people that are also from out of town that come in specifically for certain things and then leave again, that creates demand. And then that keeps everything going. I'm not saying those are the only factors, but that definitely pushes how a city or a place can then have a high rate of human trafficking. So here alone in New York City, even though it's in Jersey, you have the stadiums, you have here on 34th, you have Madison Square Garden, you have the US Open, things like that still are big name places, Yankee Stadium, Met Stadium, where there's really big arenas that you have huge concerts and huge things like that people will then come to. And then even though they're leaving, it really provides the opportunity for this to be happening.
Okay, so you just said a whole mouthful. Right away, you talked about the stadiums. So I guess, and the stadiums hold millions of people, well, hundreds of thousands of people. And so you're saying that when we talk about corporations and Wall Street, who own these stadiums and these airports, they are well aware of what is happening, condoning it.
So no, not necessarily. So no, that's not what I mean. What I mean is that if you have certain events that happen, so it's about like supply and demand. So if there's certain events that are happening where there's so many people coming from out of town, people that come for a specific reason to go to a sporting event, to go to a concert, what have you, then you have those who are the traffickers who will then bring people in or have people available to do whatever these people are willing to pay for. So I'm in no way blaming the people who own the stadiums or who own, that's not it. It's just that it makes it easier and there's more availability when things like this are happening because you have a huge flow of people coming through and going out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So whenever, I don't know if you've heard this before, but usually whenever there is a major event like a Super Bowl or anything like that, they usually have a lot of PSAs. They usually have a lot of organizations that are out there really letting people know that if they see something, to say something, that if they have an inkling that someone is being trafficked, if they have an inkling that someone is being forced to do something they don't want to do, for them to notify. And they put information out there too for those who are being trafficked. And I think you're right. I think it was a mouthful, and we should probably begin to, I don't know what you covered last week, but to go into how this even begins, because I mean, there's various ways that it can begin. but I prefer to shy away. I prefer to concentrate more on the trafficking that happens locally, in the sense of someone who's born here in New York City, who's raised here in New York City, and who's trafficked in New York City, than those who are coming from outside, because the majority is those who are actually from here. And
So talk to us
so,
about that.
so what tends to happen is, and someone mentioned this earlier, but I think before we started recording, is that it could be someone's, even a family member, who gets them into it. It can be either a parent, a cousin, a sibling, and it could be someone who's already also been trafficked. So I'll get into that in a second as well. Excuse me. But there are vulnerabilities that happens. And so when someone is seeking what they don't have, there is a process that's called grooming. I'm not sure if they mentioned that last week, but with grooming, just like when we talked about with domestic violence, with grooming, it's where they start. It's usually someone who's a little older than the person. I think I mentioned that the average age is around 11 to 13, 11 to 14, where they start grooming this young person. It tends to be female who is the person being groomed, but it can also be male. And this grooming process is where someone even can act like a boyfriend or someone who's interested in them. They start buying them clothes, they start dressing them up. Usually it's someone who is not able to do that for themselves. And then part of that process is where they then become accustomed to this. Many times they also get them hooked on some kind of substance. Substances are a huge part of it. They become dependent on the substance, and then the person who's grooming them is the only person who can provide that substance. And then that's where there's this like tailspin into, I will do anything to maintain what I have, to maintain what I'm getting. And then that's when it goes full-fledged into the actual trafficking part. And that's where you have a pimp. That's where then a lot of times those who have been trafficked also become part of those who are getting others. So there's also the part of someone who has been trafficked. For them to no longer sometimes be the one who's being trafficked, they go out and find somebody else as well. It doesn't mean they come out of what's called the life. Whenever they say they're part of the life, they're talking about the life of being like trafficked or prostitution. Then there's a term called bottom bitch, and they're the ones that are then tend to go and get other females. And so then that way they are no longer the one who needs to necessarily be having sex, but they're then also helping with the grooming part to get more and more people. So it's a very intense and sad cycle, but it is definitely a cycle. And where those who sometimes are trafficked then also become part of helping the traffickers themselves. Let me know if this is making sense or not making sense.
Yes.
It is. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is that this is happening in all of our neighborhoods. This is happening under the noses of a lot of people, because just like Pamela said, this doesn't just happen to one type of person. This can honestly happen to anyone. Anyone can find themselves in a position where, because again, it doesn't start off right away. What we all think of like human trafficking, what we all think of prostitution, forced prostitution, but there is a grooming process. There's a process of, somebody feeling like they're part of a family, someone feeling like they're a part of something, someone feeling like they're being loved by someone, being protected. A lot of time it's all about protection as well. A lot of people are not coming from great families, coming from great situations, and they feel that the situation they're getting themselves into is not as bad as where they're coming from. And that can be the case. So it's difficult sometimes too to, when in the past, when I have spoken with victims and they don't want to come out of the life, they don't want to necessarily go back to what was before, because it could have very much been worse than what they're going through. That's where the resources are really important. And so there are many resources out there, specifically when someone chooses to leave the life. And I think that that's a huge part of it as well. letting them know that they do have choices as well. Nobody's going to pressure them, because just like with DV, it's important for someone to be making that decision for themselves and not to feel like they're being forced into something. That was a mouthful as well. So if people have specific questions, I can answer specific questions.
Does anybody have any questions that they want to give to Emmanuel right now?
I don't have a question, but a statement
Okay.
that I know that trafficking will increase when there is a major sports event.
Mhm.
Like I heard how it increases before the Super Bowl. Wherever the Super Bowl is, they'll start recruiting months before. So they're on the outlook of it. I know my daughter lives in Myrtle Beach, and human trafficking is big there because of all the men that tend to go there for golfing. And not only is it just adult women, but there's a problem with children being trafficked in South Carolina as well, which I would imagine is all over the country.
Does anybody else want to ask a question or comment on what Emmanuel just said to us?
I have a question. So when he said that when these sporting events take place and the human trafficking is at its most high, who would you say are the people that are soliciting those individuals that's tied into the sports event? How
So
is that tied to the sports event?
usually it's out of towners. Usually it's people that are not necessarily usually from the area, and it makes it safer for them to come do whatever they're going to do and then leave again. Obviously that's just one type of trafficking, but that's usually what tends to happen. It tends to be easier for people to do it that way, more so than someone who lives in the area or someone who like is in the immediate area. That, and by no means, that does not mean that from someone in New York City wouldn't also participate or be a part of that. But it just tends to be that there is more supply, if you will, because they know that people are looking for that in such a large mass way.
Hello, Emmanuel.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I would like to know if you have any statistical data on the amount of people who are identified and prosecuted for this crime.
I do not. I used to do a workshop on human trafficking, but it was in California, and I don't specifically work in the Human Trafficking Bureau. In the past, I did, like in 2013, I helped run what was called Star and Epic, and that was for, this was before, but that was for those who had been arrested for prostitution. And it was a program that they could do, and then it would no longer be on the record. But unfortunately, I don't have those statistics. What I can do is tomorrow even, I can get in touch with one of the bureau chiefs in the trafficking unit and see if they can pull some of that information. And I can definitely email that to the organization. And then they can add that to the slideshow. Because I believe that they have a slideshow that goes along with this.
That would be helpful. I do have a follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
What is the level of criminal charge that these people are faced with if they are caught and prosecuted? I mean, what is there a jail sentence and fines, or how is that handled?
So it's a variety. And the variety has to do with if someone is the person doing the trafficking, or if someone is the John. The John is the person who is soliciting, the person who is paying for it. Then it also has to do with the age of those who are being trafficked, So there's a lot of different parts to it. There is not just one straight charge, but there's a variety of charges, and it also has to do with past criminal history. It also has to do if they're sex offenders. So again, when it comes to age, it has to do with their participation in it. So there's a lot. So it's hard for me to say that it's specifically 1 to 3 years or something like that. Everything has to be taken into account. And for a lot of these, there's multiple charges. So there's multiple counts. But even with that, it could be concurrent or it can be separate. And so what I can also do though is when I get in touch with the bureau chief, I can also have them, I don't know if they have necessarily like an outline, but they can definitely send what some of the charges look like and what the sentencing looks like. But I will tell you that I definitely think that there's a lack of legislation around this. I think over the last couple of years, there's been a lot more attention, but especially when it comes to, and we had this conversation before we started recording, but that in the past, it seemed that those who were arrested for prostitution were actually getting a more severe consequence than those who were actually paying for the prostitution. So who would be the Johns. And so it was a very uneven consequence. But, you know.
How many of the victims are rescued from this crime? And what happens to them? Is there a place where they can, a safe place where they can go?
So that's part of the challenge. A lot of those who are part of, again, what's called the life, a lot of them don't necessarily feel as though they are a victim, or that some of them don't want to leave the life. And so a lot of this has to do with being conditioned, with being, the indoctrination of being a part of something. More and more somebody tells you a specific thing, you're going to start believing it. And so there is a lot of, brainwashing. There is a lot of them not understanding the situation per se. And a lot of them who have come from really, really difficult places to begin with and find safety in being part of something like this, even though us on the outside would obviously be like, this is definitely not safe. But those who do want to come out, there are definitely resources and places for them to be able to go. Like even certain youth shelters will have specific places and beds set aside for those who are identified as being trafficked.
Is this information communicated in that group or in that environment, that help is available to them?
They try, but again, it's almost like infiltrating, let's say, like a gang. So there are, there's ways for gang members to get out of a gang, but that's not necessarily information that most people are open to. And so it's not identical. I don't want to say that it's exactly like being in a gang, but again, a lot of it does have to do with being a part of something. A lot of them consider themselves being a part of a family. That it's not just 1 or 2 people, but usually there's quite a few that are involved in this, in one setting.
Thank you.
Definitely. And what I can do is, let me, if I go to can everybody still see me right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll keep answering questions, but I'm just looking something up and seeing if I can find the resource.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Okay, great. In the meantime, does anybody else have a question that they would like to give to Emmanuel? Yes, I have another question. Do they have like safe houses for those that want to be rescued from trafficking?
Yes. So that's what I'm looking up right now. There are very specific organizations that work to help that. So those who do want to come out of the life, to have a place to go, to be able to have a safe place. So I know that I believe Safe Horizon, I'm sure has been mentioned before. Safe Horizon does have an anti-trafficking program. There's also there's a New York anti-trafficking coalition. There is also there through Sanctuary for Families. There's also an initiative. So especially if it comes through our office, there are organizations that we then involve to have those services provided. And that's completely separate than the actual court case or anything that has to do with the court case. This is all separate for someone to be able to go to, even if there is no case. But I think the most important thing of the conversation, resources are extremely important. So if you know, and I want those to be available, but I think it's really important to really think about, like, why would someone either I don't want to use the word voluntarily, but how does someone get caught up in this? And I think that that's a really important conversation to have. Because again, victims of human trafficking, they're all types. It's not just one specific type of person. And so if people are open to having that conversation, I think that's a really important conversation to have. Do people have like a certain person or type that you think of when you think of human trafficking?
When I think of human trafficking, I think of someone who is very dependent. Financially, they're not financially sound. They may have low self-esteem. Those are some of the things I think of when I think about human trafficking, why someone could kind of find themselves there.
Yeah.
Something we've seen a lot of is people being trafficked by their actual boyfriends. And so where they're in a relationship with the person who's trafficking them. And there's been times where there was an arrest, both of them were arrested, and they're very much open to the idea of that being the case, of, this is what they're asking me to do, I'm willing to do it. And then it goes that route. But just like you said, there's this dependency, there's this protection factor. There can even be emotional and even a emotional and romantic connection to the person, even though they are being trafficked. And when I say trafficked, there's very specifics of where they are performing or having there's some type of sexual behavior with another individual or individuals, and there is money or some type of compensation for the services that they're providing. And usually that compensation is not going just to them, but it's going to somebody else. So I think that distinction has to be made, and it needs to be there, where the person who is actually providing the service is not receiving 100% of whatever the compensation is.
So would you say that human trafficking is forced prostitution?
So correct. But there's different ways of thinking about force, right? So some of those who are being forced might not even see it as being forced. That's where the fraud and coercion part comes in. Remember, there were 3 elements to it. It's force, fraud, or coercion. And so now when it's a minor, that goes out the window. Like, it's just, that's because minors cannot consent to sex.
Oh my God.
And so what happens to those who, and talking about minors, what happens to those who put minors into these situations? Does the government or the DAs, do they aggressively go after these people?
Yes. But it's difficult. It's difficult because in order to do that, you need someone to testify. You need a witness, you need victims, you need And many times, either it's out of fear or again, out of not feeling like you're a victim, not feeling like you're being forced or coerced or that there's any type of fraud. And so even if there is an arrest, someone following through and stating that this is what's happening to them can be quite difficult. And it can also be fear. Like, again, I'm sure that there's a lot of pimps. There's a lot of people who are forcing and are the ones pushing them to do this, that have told them, you say something's either going to happen to you, happen to your family. Again, most of them are people from New York City, are people from here.
You know, when you talk about pimps, last week we had talked about there was 2 different types of pimps. The one that says they love you and the one that you know, uses you and you at the bottom line is, you know, they're using you. Can you tell us about the 2 different types?
Well, I want to also throw out there that it can be one and the same, that there's not necessarily always such a clear distinction between the two, and that it can go back and forth, that it can seem like they love you and then all of a sudden seem like they're using you, and then it can go back to the love part. Because it's very rare that it just starts off with the using part. That's where the grooming comes in. And then once it's the using part, if the person's become so accustomed or so dependent, because usually there's drugs involved, then they don't really care that they're being used, because then they also need the product. And I think it ranges. It's just not so clear cut. So when we're thinking about one type of pimp or the other, I do think that there's other types as well. There's those that you know, seem like they're your best friend, or those that seem like a protector, those that seem like a father figure, those that seem like they're looking out for your best interest, even if there's no romance, even if there's no no physical attention given. But I don't know if I answered that or not.
You did.
Yes, yeah, I think you did. When we, the hardest thing about this whole situation is that people from the outside are looking at it in a certain manner, and the people that are involved in it, even the victim, who we are identifying as the victim, does not. So the sense of what we call normalcy is not there.
Correct.
And so when you say to them, this is not normal, they're looking at you like you have 3 heads, because they don't know what normal is.
Well,
So
I think
education, yes, I'm sorry.
No, so sorry to interrupt, but I think along those lines, we have to take into consideration social media. We have to take into consideration pop culture.
Yes.
Where you're watching these videos, you're watching these different artists who, like it or not, or if they admit it or not, they are perpetuating this type of thinking of, you know, use your sexuality, use your body, use your way. And I'm not saying that they are promoting trafficking, but there is a promotion of being able to use one's body. And so if one finds themselves where they don't necessarily know how to do it themselves, it's very easy for them to fall under somebody else's use of them.
Yeah.
And so I think for them, what they see on television, what they see in social media, that can be normal for them. That's what they believe is normal. Right. And if what they're looking for is extravagance, you know, again, back to the grooming part, is getting them really expensive clothing, really expensive jewelry, really expensive perfumes and things like that. Now, the grooming part is just a part, because that usually does not last very long. Right. And so it's just for the very beginning. Just like with a drug, where the first time you use a drug, you get that really high first high, and then you're always constantly trying to achieve that again. But
okay, so what I'm getting out of this at this point is that education is important.
Totally.
Early, because we're talking about 12-year-olds, and I just can't even fathom that a 12-year-old is getting into the life like that. So we probably need to start in the schools or have some kind of a consistent community outreach where we're educating our community, our youth included, or especially about these human trafficking situations. Because as a parent or a grandparent, you just don't even think about human trafficking. It doesn't come across your mind that that's something you should be talking to your young person about. And they might know about it because they might know somebody that's involved and you don't even know.
I promise all of you that in our communities, this is happening. In all of our communities.
Wow.
One way or another, this is happening.
Emmanuel, when you just said that, I get the vision came to me of young girls who we hear stories, 15, 16 years old, went out to the store and just disappeared. That just came to me. And parents are looking for their children, and something tells me they're being trafficked.
Yeah, yeah. Oh.
Again, I mean, across the country, there's a very, very large number, especially girls of color. There's a very, very large number of girls of color who have disappeared and have not been found. And I mean, it's a really, really intense issue. But I think, you know, like you said, with education now, I can't give you the answer to this. If New York City, I don't think it's part of their curriculum. No. But when I stated that I used to do the human trafficking workshops in California, it was actually for middle school and high schoolers in the San Francisco Department of Education. It was in their school system. And so because San Francisco, just like New York City, they have a lot of ports. So there's a lot of cruises that come through, a lot of ships that come through. They have Amtrak, they have buses, they have 3 airports, Oakland, San Jose, and also San Francisco. And they also have a lot of sporting events. So it was also one of those places that there was a huge, huge amount of human trafficking that was happening. And I'll find out. I don't think that there is a curriculum because that was under the health curriculum that they had. And so they had to take it as a middle schooler and as a high schooler. You had to take that training, that presentation the students did. And I do think that it definitely helped. People were aware. I'm not saying that, you know, it just stopped altogether, but then at least there's more awareness of what's happening.
Yes, yes. Awareness is key. Awareness is key. And so that when somebody comes up to you, it makes it more difficult that somebody is somebody you know. I think that's where it gets kind of hairy. If it's your uncle or cousin or your girlfriend, it makes it harder to identify if they're coming to you and saying, well, let's go shopping and, you know, I'm going to buy you this top, and it's a top that you've been yearning for and your people just can't buy it for you. And your girlfriend or boyfriend says, yes, they can buy it for you as a way of luring you in. You don't know that this is happening. Last program year, we spoke to a young woman who, actually a reverend, whose sister was trafficked. She was a high school student, A student, getting ready to go to college, no problems, was out with her girlfriend, went over to the Barclay, induced by this friend, and they were there, and then she was encouraged to go off with this gentleman and found herself being trafficked. Now she was threatened with this girlfriend's life, who she never saw again after that point because they kept her isolated. But once she, by the grace of God, she got out. She took pictures of different places that she was at with her cell phone, and her sister, who was, you know, aggressively looking for her with law enforcement, they did find her, which is totally unusual. But when she was found, she eventually, through the investigation, they found out that this girlfriend was part of this trafficking ring. So her life was never in danger. But the victim never knew that. And so she was always afraid that if she did something to challenge the situation, that she would get her hurt. And so it's so sad to know that she would have taken advantage of her on that level.
Well,
That
and
one had a moral compass to care about her, and the other, it was like
well,
kaput.
and I don't know the specific situation, but I do know that there's instances where the one who got her involved, the one who brought her,
Yeah,
that a lot of times they do that because if they don't do that, then there is a likelihood that something could happen to them, or in the past if they were that person. And so it's difficult to, sometimes say like why someone does that. And yeah, and I know that you were mentioning the moral compass, and I'm not saying that, that the case couldn't have been that she just did that because she wanted to be part of this. But a lot of times we do find that they do it because they themselves are scared too. They'd rather it be somebody else than themselves, or they'd rather be somebody else than somebody go after their family, or somebody, they know get hurt. Now, I want to point out that the majority are females, but I did have a case, and I won't get into like too many specifics, obviously for confidentiality, but I did have a case where it came out that a 20-something-year-old man he himself had been trafficked. And I would use the word trafficked by, it was his mom who was lending him to her friends. And so it was a variety of women that would come over, and then they would, she would allow them to take him off into a room. And this happened over the years.
wow.
And the reason I bring that up is because that was here in Brooklyn. It was in a family that you wouldn't necessarily, again, it's across the board where there's not someone where you would just be like, oh, this is happening to them. This is the type of person that would do this. And so just to keep that in mind, that there's so many things going on under our noses, in our neighborhoods that we just are not aware of, because it's easier not to think it's happening than to face that it is happening. But again, that education piece is key. But when it comes to males, it is very hard for them to come forward with something like that.
Yeah. They will probably perceive themselves as being weak, but
Right.
they're being taken advantage of.
I mean, what do you do when it's your own mom? What do you do when it's your own parent?
Right. Because now telling on them means that the whole family unit, whatever you feel are comforts in that situation, your place where you live,
Everything.
the way you're being taken care of, is connected to these travesties. So I don't know.
Exactly.
But again, education, we have to continue to educate them as young as possible so they can recognize what it is, and also avail them with the kinds of information that helps them make that transition to say, well, I've been living in this mansion, but I'm coming out of here because I don't want to live this way. There's a different way for me to live, a different reality for me. And I want that. I want to know what that feels like.
Well, and I think resources and services, like they wouldn't be so tempted, or it wouldn't be so easy to necessarily groom someone if people had opportunities, if people felt like they had a way to perhaps, get that themselves, or had a clear-cut vision on what a future could look like.
Yeah.
But it's when you have vulnerable populations that sometimes feel like there's no other real way to be able to get something, then. So I think it starts with that too. It's really, a huge economic piece, vulnerability and poverty.
Yeah, socioeconomic situations it's sad. It's sad that it's 2021 and we're going through this kind of thing on this level when we're supposed to be as a society more educated, have more empathy for one another. And the more I learn in this investigation, the more I find that that is not the case, and too many of our citizens don't feel secure. And so that saddens me. It really saddens me.
Okay,
Understand, of course, what they're talking about. I'm not a.
Wait, hold on.
let me just say, I see that Deirdre Oliveira has her hand raised.
Yes.
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone. This is such a interesting topic. I want to commend everyone for bringing it to the forefront. You know, it's so amazing, as you said, that these things can happen right in our neighborhoods, and we're not aware of it because it isn't publicly discussed, or, you know, it just isn't a topic, like you said, that should be taught to our youngsters what to look out for. With that being the case, I wanted to know two things. One is, do you have statistics on what's going on with human trafficking when it comes to Brooklyn? That would be one. And second, you know, as a chairperson for the legislative committee in this community board, Pamela, of which Pamela is also a member, what is it that we could possibly do legislatively to help to bring this to the forefront, and whatever else that we can do to try to deter these types of things from happening in our neighborhoods?
So I would, and is that question was directed towards me, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You better believe it. Of course it is.
So there's a couple things. One, so I'm just trying to think of the statistics. Again, I can send those over. I don't know how recent they are, but we can definitely try to find statistics on, at least when it comes to like arrests and things like that, through the bureau, and I can send that over. I can send an email over to the bureau chief and try to get that information. Now, when it comes to legislation, I think that part of it is, we talked about the distinction between sex work and human trafficking. And I think part of it is understanding the difference of those, because a lot of that has to also do with safety and getting legislation to really put the focus instead of on those who are involved in sex work. And again, sex work, the difference is that someone who identifies as a sex worker, they are the ones who are getting the compensation. So there is no outsider who is, and they're also not being forced. They're also not underage. This is something that they have chosen, and they are doing themselves, not something that somebody else has forced them to do, or is in charge of them or getting compensation for. When you're able to really concentrate on the trafficking part of it, then there can be more legislation on the consequences. So we talked a little bit about like what those charges look like and what the consequences can be. That's where legislation, I mean, I personally feel needs to be headed, but it really is the education around that, on what it looks like. Because I think people have stereotypes around human trafficking, around what a victim of human trafficking, of sex trafficking looks like. And that is definitely not always the case. And so I think that that's what really needs to be the focus. But all community councils, I think all neighborhoods need to make it a priority. Because like I stated before, I honestly do believe that in every neighborhood, this is occurring. People just don't know what it looks like.
You know, I mean,
You don't gotta get home. I can go. I can see what I can talk with me on the phone.
hold on. All right. Thank you. So is there anything, I mean, just how is it that we can help, or what is it that we can do? You know, I'm kind of cut and dry sometimes.
Mhm.
I want to know, what can we do to assist, or what can we do to bring this to the forefront? I mean, this is just horrendous. Like I said, I hearing you talk about it, I know at one point in time, some years ago, about actually almost 30 years ago, I worked at the largest shelter in Brooklyn. And there we saw so much I don't want to say human trafficking, as far as sex trafficking, like you said, mothers who had, just kind of turned a blind eye to the fact that the father was pimping out the daughter to the sons and other family members. So we really saw a lot of that kind of thing in the shelter system. Girls as young as 11 or 12 that were already out there being forced to work in clubs and stuff like that and strip. And even then, and at that point in time, I was, executive, but it was just like, how do we address this on a larger scale to protect these young women and young men, these boys and girls, really, what can we do to protect them?
I mean, I think this is, what we've been discussing is really the education around it, really letting them know what resources are out there. There is it's hard to say that there's a specific thing to do. I mean, there's organizations that currently are out there pretty much with the arms open, that if someone then chooses to get out of the life, or they find themselves, almost getting into life, being able to have a safe place to go to, there are those organizations. I think what you were saying about legislation and about really going to like community meetings and letting people know the different ways that this can look like, I think is one of the key steps. Because just like when we were talking about domestic violence, we were talking about intimate partner violence, it's more so that people know that there's support out there, and not just support from an agency or an organization out there, but really support from within the community. I think that's really where people can really put their hands in. Obviously, people can volunteer at organizations, they can do volunteer work, but I think it really is starting with one's own community. Having this discussion within the churches, having this discussion, again, community council meetings at schools, seeing how many schools are actually putting this as a priority. People can go to the schools that are close to where they live, to the high schools, to the middle schools, finding out if information is posted. So if they don't have curriculum that's really addressing this, are they at least, putting posters up, putting information up for students to know what to look out for? Because again, this is what human trafficking and sex trafficking is one of those things that once you're in it, it is very difficult to then get out of it. And that grooming process, it's a process. And so it's not just the physical stuff that they get. It's not just the caring, the loving part, but it's this being indoctrined. It's this brainwashing that occurs. And so it's important that they have these the support from the community.
Are you combining sex trafficking with domestic violence? Because please don't tell me you just combined the two.
I'm not combining the two, but
because that would be a lot. That's a lot. Yeah.
So, but what I was saying is that in the last panels that we've had, we talked about the importance of addressing domestic violence and intimate partner violence within the churches, addressing it within the community, where it's not just telling people Safe Horizon exists, this organization exists, but actually having conversations with people within the community and educating people within the community. So I would say the same thing when it comes to sex trafficking, for people to know that the community supports them, that the community is there, that the community is aware.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm not going to hold you up. I'm sure other people have questions that they may want to ask as well. Last thing, do you have, so is there like do you have like any kind of pamphlet written up which has where these resources are listed that say, hey, I want to go and get some, I want to get some printed up. I know there's a shelter like a few blocks away from me, and I would personally go and hand them out at the shelter and say, hey, how about you put some of these up, and also have some of them available for other groups or meetings that we may be involved in.
We do. And now I'm going to look it up while I'm talking. In the DA's website, you can go to the actual bureau, the human trafficking one, and I believe that the brochure is on there, but I'll look it up and then I can share that. But really quickly, so I'm curious to when you said that it was a lot for it to be connected with DV, because I did mention before that there are relationships, and I would include DV, in which the person is then forced to, and it could very much be considered sex trafficking, and they're forced into having sex with other people for compensation. And these are their partners. So it is, I mean, it doesn't happen in every DV situation, but it can happen where it is both domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and also sex trafficking. So
You know what? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
I just
when
wanted to be
said
clear
it-
about that part.
No, you're very clear. When I said it was a lot, I literally, I don't know if there's been an uptick in domestic violence, especially amongst younger women. But I have seen younger women, I mean, as of recently, where I've called the police, like, listen, this guy's punching her in the face, telling her to take his shirt off because he bought it. And you call the police, and the police is showing up, and they're not doing anything about it. And I've seen a serious increase in these type of incidents going on. And I don't even know if the police have been instructed on how to handle it, because even when they pulled up and they saw that her face was swollen, they didn't arrest the guy. They actually let them both walk away together because she said, no, I don't want to press charges. But I'm sitting there yelling, do you see her face? She's scared. And the guy's telling her she better not say anything. So anyway, so when I said, I didn't mean it was a lot, like it's just too much for us to deal with. I just meant that I see a real uptick in that. And I think that that in itself needs to be addressed, as well as a human trafficking. I just don't
Definitely.
see how to combine it two, because it is definitely its own issue,
Definitely. And again, I think that and someone mentioned this before, like, what is normalcy and what does relationships look like? What are some relationships supposed to look like? And there is it's so muddy, I think, for a lot of young people, that they don't really understand what they want or what they should be getting or what a healthy relationship looks like. And so a lot of times that also is what drives someone into being able to fall victim to sex trafficking and to fall victim to domestic violence, is when a person doesn't really understand what a healthy relationship is, and what they're seeking out of a relationship, what they deserve out of a relationship. And so, those are really intense conversations, extremely important conversations to have. But like you stated, where to start, I honestly believe that it starts with community. It starts with the family. It starts with really feeling support around oneself, being able to have, ask questions to those who are older, being able to ask questions to those who you respect, who you trust. And so that can be hard if someone does not feel that they have a solid community or that they have support. Am I able to share my screen?
Yeah, Antonio, give me one. I mean, Emmanuel, give me one moment. I keep saying, I don't know, because it's you and it be you and Antonio. And Emmanuel, give me one moment, okay?
Okay.
So he can share. I just wanted to say, Miss Oliveira, the fact that you did call the police was the right thing to do. You stayed on the scene. You tried to navigate through that situation to get her help, but she was afraid, as you could see. But I think if it's more of that from our community, maybe if 2 or 3 guys would have said something, that would have made him stand up and think about what he was doing, and not do it right there on the street, not feel comfortable enough to do it on the street. It's bad enough that he does it, but he has the nerve to do it right on the street, and that's disgusting. But again, peer pressure is not, when you talk about peer pressure, it's not only for the youth, it's for adults. People should feel a way about some of these behaviors, that they're not acceptable and we will not accept them. So we need to speak out more. Oftentimes, if you see a group of youth or even adult doing something they have no business, and you could just say, really, are you serious? Do you think that that's appropriate? And I wouldn't say that. I would be afraid. No, you shouldn't be afraid of right. And it's the way you confront a person, the way you speak to them, you usually get that back. And they say, oh, I'm sorry, miss. They were using profanity or whatever, and they say, oh, excuse me, and they go off. And normally people wouldn't do that. But I think we need to come out of our comfort zone in order to have a decent place to be.
I was going to say that I think that that's why New York City is one of those places, or any city, because a lot of times people don't want confrontation. They are nervous of you know, if they
Yeah.
do get into the confrontation, or if they get into what's going on, then they themselves, you know, can be attacked. So a lot of times in these huge buildings that we live in, we hear someone screaming, we hear someone fighting.
Yeah.
A lot of people turn the other way and don't want to get involved. And I think that that's another way that that these things go unnoticed. But
Yeah.
I did want to show, so this is the, and I can put it in the chat. This is the
Yes,
brooklyndas.org website. It's under victim services. You'll see that there's a human trafficking unit. And if you go down here, there's a hotline. And then there's also all the different goals that that we have, that there's a human trafficking task force.
Task force, yeah.
It also talks about the victim and how the collaborative approach really constantly circling and centered around that the victim is the center of it. And then under resources, you'll see that there's law enforcement resources, healthcare resources, community resources. So I'm going to click on one of them. This is the community resources, and then I'll go back. But this will give you some, this is one of the pamphlets that we have, if it shows up. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. But you see it over here, right? I'm not sure why it's not
Yes,
showing
yeah.
up.
Yeah, you should be able to click on that and it should come over. It should.
Let's see if I
Yes. Oh.
let's see if it works this time.
Yeah, you should be able to click on that doc and it come over.
That's not good.
Emmanuel, no worries. I be messing around too, okay?
I don't know why it's not clicking. No, but this is good to know, so I can tell them that it's not that it's not working. But so you go to this website. Hopefully when all of you go to this website, it'll work for you.
You'll be able to-
Here's the law enforcement resources. I wonder if that one will pop up. No.
Interesting.
I know, it is very interesting.
But at least it's there and one can copy from that site.
Right. Antonio, if you could just I mean, Emmanuel, Emmanuel, if you could just
Oh,
click
okay.
the top of your screen and put it into the chat, and that
Okay.
way folks could download the yep.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah.
So, yeah. While we're doing that,
So, and then this is the Human Trafficking Unit Resource Guide. So this has everything. And again, it's in collaboration with Safe Horizon and with the Department of Justice. And this has a bunch of information. So this will also have the statistics that people were asking for. This will have all of the different, so this even has like White Plains, New York, Alexandria, Virginia. They have all different resources here. This is Mount Sinai over on Amsterdam Avenue.
Okay.
Metropolitan. And so
Is this current information?
This is current information.
Okay.
This is one of the ones that I really, that I've worked with a lot. So this is the Sylvia Rivera Law Project. And this is, they specifically work with those who identify as LGBTQIA+, and mostly transgender individuals who are very, very high when it comes to traffic victims. And the Sylvia Rivera Law Project works specifically, they help with like name changes and things like that. It's a legal agency. And then there's the Ali Forney Center, which does housing for LGBT youth as well. But yeah, so these are all different resources. And
you're wonderful.
Excellent. So
For
again,
anybody,
I'm sorry, Deb. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I thank you for the work that you do. This is not, it would really tug at my heart. It's not an easy work.
It's very difficult because and I'll say from the beginning, I've been doing this type of work for a while. And again, now I'm not specifically working in the trafficking unit, but it's hard because you have to remove yourself from like what you think you would do because you're not in that person's shoes, and really just provide them with the resources for when they're ready. Because again, it's really important for people to have agency and for them to feel like they have options, because that's something that, you know, the situation they're in, usually they haven't been giving any options. And so it's important for them to feel like they do have options. But I appreciate that. It can be very emotional work, and it is tough. At the bottom here, there are press releases. So I know someone asked earlier about the sentencing. So this might give you some information as well. Like here it says a Coney Island man was sentenced to 10 years in prison following a guilty plea of sex trafficking of a child.
Wow.
This one is an East New York man was indicted for sex trafficking of a 15-year-old girl. So that can give you some information, just what that can look like.
Right, right. So we know that it can be done, but there's work that has to happen for it to come to fruition.
Correct.
And so again, I saw the word collaborative in that piece there, and that's the key, that we continue to collaborate with like organizations, with our community boards, and definitely work on some legislation, and work on continuing to improve resources so that people have a alternative to the life that they found themselves in for whatever reason, help them transition. And so if the Brooklyn Club and our illustrious national organization can help that to happen, because this forum, or these kinds of forums, are supposed to be happening all over the country. I want you to know, Emmanuel. So it's a charge that we have been has been put on us from our national, so that all
That's
our
great.
districts should be identifying this issue and working for it to at least subside. Like, we know it's not going to disappear tomorrow, but nothing disappears tomorrow. It's always a process, and it's always collaboration and people working together to make it happen. I think when we work in little vacuums, that's not going to work. It's like you're beating your head up against the wall. You have to collaborate with others that are doing the same work, so that you reach more people and you get that information out. And so we're going to try to figure out how we can get some kind of workshops done for junior high and high schools, and be instrumental in making that happen. We have several members that are on that work for the Board of Ed, that are on our school boards, and then we have sisters on the line now that are part of community boards, and maybe we can get the community boards to collaborate on this issue, where it's at least a Brooklyn-wide thing if we can't get it citywide. But because of technology, I know we can make this happen.
And feel free to share this information. I mean, just like with this brochure, which I also put in the chat, this brochure gives a pretty concise way of showing like what is human trafficking. Here is those three, the process, the means, and the ends. It talks about the basic stages of grooming that we talked about. And then it also breaks it up into labor trafficking and sex trafficking. And what someone mentioned earlier, like what are some of the red flags? I think this is extremely important. Really thinking of like when you see these things, when someone does have picture of escort ads on a phone, you know, things like that, where you're like, what is that? You know, asking questions. If you see someone with multiple hotel keys and they're not, you know, they're in the neighborhood, like, why do you have hotel keys? Someone who is, let's say,
getting me.
What was that?
The tattoos.
So and that's a huge part too. There's the branding part is like when they have the name of someone on them, and it's a name that multiple people have of the same person. That is definitely a way of seeing. So, you know, that if you want to share this, you know, definitely
it's good. It's quite extensive.
Is this type of information shared within the school districts for teachers and staff?
I want to say yes.
Young people.
I want to say yes. I don't know if it's necessarily
And choices?
shared in curriculum. But
Mhm.
if you give me 1 second, my roommate actually is a teacher, so I can ask her really quickly.
Okay.
Give me 1
I don't
second.
think- Okay. So, so part of what moving forward, we're gonna be doing is trying to find out if it's part of curriculum. I don't think it is. I know my grandson hasn't had it. He's 15.
So I'm
Okay.
going to say that it is addressed in schools. There is a curriculum to address it. I'm also going to say that having 1 or 2 lessons on something doesn't mean
Not
that
enough.
it's going to be impactful in the ways that we need for our children. I mean, we already know they have to hear a song 5 times before they know the lyrics. So we need to repeat these messages often and make sure that they are able to articulate them back, because we can talk to our children, but it doesn't mean they're absorbing the information.
Okay.
So I got a very disappointing answer for everyone. So she stated, so she's a teacher at a high school, a public high school. And she said no, on both accounts, that they don't get trainings around human trafficking and that students don't get it.
There is a lesson plan for students. It is not necessarily a training that staff will get. And unfortunately, this is where we get reactionary. When it happens in a school, then it becomes urgent and we have to make sure all of our staff are aware. But maybe your roommate should check with the school counselor tomorrow, because they have a curriculum
So
that they
but-
are supposed to be doing with students annually.
So I guess that's the thing when it comes to curriculum, where I this is just the little bit that I know, that when there is curriculum, sometimes curriculum like that, if that it's not a priority, that if there's other things that they have to do first, or they feel that is a
Okay.
priority, then certain curriculum will be pushed back and maybe just not actually have the full curriculum. But it's good to know. I'll definitely tell her that, to check in with the. But yeah, if the staff and the teachers are not trained on it, they're the ones that are really going to notice the things, because they're the ones that really have the rapport with the students.
Mm-hmm.
They're on
True.
the front line and don't realize it.
Right, right. So we're gonna be picking your brain, Miss Lori S. Hutchinson, because we want to first and foremost, being that it is part of curriculum, figure out ways to pressure the Board of Ed to make sure that this curriculum is a presented. It's there. You say it's there, then we want our youth to receive this information. Maybe 2 times is not enough, but it's better than not at all.
Sure.
But maybe they can show it once a quarter, you think?
I'm going to say that's probably unrealistic, but I'm also going to say that the most important thing that can happen in our schools is that every child feels that there's an adult that they trust, that they're safe with, that they can talk to. I cannot tell you the number of times a child has said to me, "Can I tell you a secret?" And that is never the start of a good conversation. It's always something that is like a punch to your gut.
Yeah.
But it's also it speaks to the fact that they felt that there was an adult that cared enough about them, that would trust them, that would protect them.
Yeah.
And there's no end to when that students need that. They need that humans need that throughout their lives.
Yeah.
But students need that all the
Yeah.
way through high school, all the way through college. There needs to be an adult in their school, just one, that cares enough and makes the space. And I think that just as important as having this training is having training in creating those spaces. And there's a number of ways you can do it. Listening circles, empathetic listening, all the things that we do to create more inclusive school communities are things that give kids room to trust adults so they can have a conversation. They can say, "I need help," or "I don't like something that's happening." And if we don't give our teaching staff the room to develop those skills, and I can't program and we can't mandate empathy, But we
Yeah.
can give you the skills to emulate empathy and make room for students to talk to you.
Mhm.
Well, I was going to say something that's probably not a very popular opinion, but I know that I know that teachers are very overwhelmed and that a lot of them shy away from not wanting to have those, like they don't want to have those conversations because they don't know what to do with the information. So like you said, like, yeah, the students will come up and definitely share something, but I do know that there's teachers that are like, this is not what I signed up for.
So teachers don't have to know what to do. They just have to know who to talk to.
Totally.
Here's
Yeah,
reality.
I agree.
Post pandemic,
Mhm,
there's suicidal ideation,
mhm.
there's abuse, there's all kinds of anxiety and mental health issues. And our teachers are the frontline workers. They see the
Yeah.
children the most. So we rely on teachers to, if you see something, say something.
Totally.
Because if a teacher sees it and doesn't say it, the consequences for that student can be disastrous
Agreed.
and life altering in a way that we can't afford as a society. So teachers did sign up for it, whether they like it or not, and they don't have to be the ones to fix it.
I think that's the key part.
Good news. You
I think that's
don't
the
have
key
to
part.
fix it.
Yeah.
You do have to alert someone.
Yeah.
And that takes the pressure off of them. Just be alert. Like,
Mhm.
come on, we're New Yorkers. Be alert. Look around. And if you
Yeah.
see something, say something. Because
Yeah.
I think that and also creating relationships and space for relationships between students where students can support each other.
Mhm.
Children will tell each other things that they would never tell an adult. And for children to know who is the adult in this building, that you take that to.
Mhm. Like a pen pal. Hook them up with
It could be
another.
a pen pal. It could be an adult that you just do a check-in with. It could, I mean, in some schools, you'd be amazed. It's school safety agent. It's just one person in that building that the kids know that they can trust and go to when they need help.
Mhm.
There's just so
Okay.
many areas where we need to fine tune. But we're gonna start it. We're gonna start it,
Yes.
and we're gonna make it happen.
Okay,
And so
everyone.
sorry, I know that we were saying about the curriculum in the schools that
Yes.
there are other cities. Again, San Francisco has it, and it's public information where they have specific curriculum for middle schoolers and for high schoolers, specifically on human trafficking. And
Yes.
so it's not even about reinventing the wheel. It's very much just taking that curriculum and sharing that, if not within the schools, but it can be in like community centers or
Right.
after school programs, things like that. Or again, even churches that have like Bible studies and things like that. If they do like a Saturday where their youth are, are able to take a class with this curriculum, they also, just like you were stating, they're the ones that can also talk to other youth. And a lot of times youth listen to other youth before they listen to
Yeah.
adults.
Yes.
Okay, everyone.
Yes.
This has really been very informative. Very, very informative. Emmanuel, you are awesome. We may need to have a part 3 to human trafficking because there's just so much information.
There is a lot.
So we'll talk about that in the coming days, okay? But right now, what I would like to do is share a PowerPoint presentation. Give me a moment. I want this to be a part of the program. Nope, I went too far. I'm sorry. Emmanuel, great job.
Again, thank you for having me. I appreciate
Excellent.
being a part of this.
Yes,
Excellent information.
yes. Thank you so much. I want to commend everyone that participated in this forum this evening. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here with us. We on the threshold of really trying to bring this human trafficking issue to the forefront, making sure that our communities know of it and can recognize it, in particular our youth, which I think we spoke about in depth tonight, which it needs to happen. When you're talking about 11 and 12-year-olds getting involved like this, it's so sad. But anyone stuck in this kind of a life situation is sad. So we're going to do what we can. We want to commit to, I want to say, reach out to Ms. Oliveira and your colleague, that we want to work together. And we also going to partner with Dr. Q and try to formulate some different kinds of legislation that would address different aspects of human trafficking that need to be checked, and also to work towards providing workshops for our community, particularly our youth, on human trafficking and different signs. We're going to definitely reproduce that flyer so that it's available out in our community. You can leave it at the store, at the Restoration Plaza. They have a place where you can put up flyers, or just do a handbill kind of thing. But we need to address this. We need to let the persons that think that they're getting away with it, that we are on to them, and we are going to stop them from continuing to victimize our community.
If you're looking to have a third part, I can definitely have one of the bureau chiefs from the trafficking unit
Yes.
attend. So I can definitely talk to him, and he'll be more than happy to attend if you wanted to do it. I know that next Thursday is Thanksgiving, but
Right.
if you wanted to do it 2 Thursdays from today,
Great.
just let me know, send me an email, and then I can forward it to him. But either he'll do it, or somebody from the actual trafficking unit would be more than happy to attend.
Okay,
And
so
will you
those statistics
also
that
be
we were looking for.
participating?
I guess I can also be there. There's also so I know that I stated before that I used to work closer with the Human Trafficking Bureau, but there's an actual counselor who's specifically within the Human Trafficking Unit, and so
Yes.
she can also be a part of it as well.
Great.
But yes, I can also be there, so that there's
Em-
more information and more experience. So
Emmanuel, Emmanuel, I'll send you an email tomorrow,
perfect.
and you and I will talk, and we'll set it up, and we'll, get the fly and everything ready for 2 Thursdays from now.
Perfect. And he can give you a lot more information specifically around the charges, what sentencing looks like, things like that.
Okay.
Emmanuel, just thank you so much. I'd like to take a moment to reintroduce my committee members. We have Lori Ayers Hutchison, who is the financial secretary. I have Adrena Coleman, who's our chaplain. We have Pamela Payne, who's our second vice president and youth director. And we have Dr. Kim Beth, who's our director of lifetime membership. We also have Madam President Barbara Biggs Glover, who is our ad hoc, and same with Tanya Webster, who's also ad hoc. I'd like to also mention that we have 3 programs upcoming. We have a sexual abuse in the workplace that will be December 9th. We have self-esteem on January 6th. And then we have Dr. Q English, who will be doing a human trafficking training for parents sometime between March and April. I would like to also reintroduce our panelist, Emmanuel DeJesus. Excellent job. So Emmanuel, before we go, you have any last thoughts you want to give us?
Yeah. Are we moving in the right direction?
Yes, 100%. I think having these discussions is extremely important and moving in the right direction. I think just to reiterate that as a community, within your community, but also as a community and an organization like this, just supporting each other. And whenever there's any questions, just really reaching out to the different organizations to get those answers. And it can be sad, it can be depressing, it can be tough, but this is all extremely necessary. So I'm, again, very happy to be a part of it and happy that, that everybody's here doing this.
Emmanuel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd like to take a moment and, Madam President, I just want to make sure, did you introduce a prominent guest?
Yes, I did earlier. I acknowledged our national president, Cheryl Carper, and our national first vice president, Dr. Connolly, and also our Northeast District of Governor, Evelyn Streeter Frizzle, and also Vice Governor Nicole McCatherine. They were not able to join us tonight because there's another session that the district is putting on as we speak.
Okay.
But we want everybody to know that this is a national special program forum that we have been encouraged from the national level down to have and to participate in. So we're not moving in a vacuum. We are part of a national movement to eradicate human trafficking in our communities.
Yes. I'd like to take this moment to thank the community for spending the evening with us. As Emmanuel DeJesus brought forth some serious information in reference to human trafficking, which is going to have us do a part 3. We'll put that together and we'll send that information out to you within the next week. But at the same time, I'd like to acknowledge from Eureka Grand Chapter, Prince Hall Order, Eastern Stars, New York State, past Grand Worthy Major Mary L. Boyd Foy, who is here, who has joined us this evening. She's also the founder of my Prince Hall Order Eastern Star Chapter, Emerald Chapter number 81. So, Past Grand, good evening.
Yes, yes, yes.
I'd also like to say hello to Deirdre Oliveira, Community Board 16 member. She is the Legislative Committee Chairperson. Deirdre, thank you so much for joining us. We will collaborate and get information to each other and do some programs together to get this information out to folks, not just in Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, Ocean Hill, but throughout as far as we can reach.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Deirdre. Thank you. Madam President, I'd like you to introduce our chaplain to give us a closing.
Our chaplain is Adrena Coleman. And we'd like Adrena to please close us out.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Emmanuel DeJesus, thank you. You did an awesome job. You did an awesome job. And again, you brought us some valuable information that we can share amongst our clubs and share amongst our friends and relatives, and especially in our community, because we know that this thing is going on. So just thank you again for what you've done, and let us bow our heads. Father God, as we go this evening off this platform, we ask you to go with us, be with us, guide us, and let us disperse this information. Lord God, if we can save one child, if we can save one person, then our work is not done in vain this evening. Bless everyone that was here tonight. Bless us as we move forward, one mind, one sound. And as we continue doing your work, give us the strength, the energy, and the might to do what we do. We thank you and we praise you until we meet again. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. Oh Lord, you are our strength, and surely you are our Redeemer. All these prayers we ask in the mighty precious name of Jesus, we pray. Amen, amen, and
amen. Amen.
God bless everybody tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night,
everyone. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
Love you all.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yes,
Thanksgiving,
happy
everyone.
Wonderful
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, everybody. God bless you.
Okay.
Blessings.
Okay, I've stopped video. Let me go back in the other room. Okay. Hold on.
It's still recording.
Give me a second. I'm gonna do another